Hi everyone. So in today's lab, we're going to learn how to make chocolate chip cookies from scratch. In this unit, we've put an emphasis on measuring ingredients properly, and now we're gonna put that to the test. I'm gonna start off by naming the things that we need for day one of this recipe. This lab is going to be done in 2 days. The first day, what we're going to do is measure our ingredients and mix up our dough. Then we're gonna throw it in the refrigerator overnight and bake our cookies on day 2. Now let's get started and see what we need for day 1. From dry storage, you will need granulated white sugar. You'll need some vanilla extract. You'll need some all-purpose flour. Next, you'll need some baking soda. Make sure you read the label carefully because we also use a different amount of baking powder in this recipe. From dry storage, you'll also need baking powder. You'll need some salt. You can use any kind, but I like kosher the best. You'll need some brown sugar. And the last thing you'll need from dry storage is some semi-sweet chocolate chips. From the refrigerator, you'll need butter, and you'll also need 1 egg. For tools and equipment on day 1, you'll need a medium-sized mixing bowl. You'll need a small portion cup to crack your egg into. You'll need a 1/2 cup dry measuring cup, measuring spoons. You'll also just need a metal spoon so you can scoop the flour out to measure properly. You'll also need a flat spatula, a rubber scraper. You'll need a large Ziploc bag labeled with your lab number, your period, whether your A or B day, and the date. In class, you will also need a stand mixer with a paddle attachment, as well as a metal bowl that fits inside it. If you don't have a stand mixer at home, that's a-okay. What you can do is you can either use an electric hand mixer or you can mix by hand. You'll just have to adjust your tools and equipment accordingly. All right, so I've made sure to pull my hair back, wash my hands. I have closed-toed shoes on. Now let's get cooking for day 1. To start making our cookies, we're gonna wanna measure out the dry ingredients first. Our first dry ingredient that we want to measure is flour. And if you remember from our video, you always wanna make sure that you use something else to spoon the flour right into your measuring cup. You wanna measure a little bit over, then you're going to use the back, the flat side of a flat spatula, tap it down to make sure there are no air bubbles, and then scrape it right off so it's nice and even like that. We're going to need 1.5 cups, so we'll need 3 of these, and then we're gonna put it right into a medium-sized bowl. Next, we're going to measure out 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. We need to make sure that it says 1/2 and then there's a T, an S, and a P. It shouldn't be a big T on there. That would be tablespoon. But how you're gonna do this is measure it the same way you measured flour, over measure a little bit, and then scrape off the top. Then you'll put that right in with your flour. We're gonna measure 1/4 teaspoon of baking powder. And since this is in a can with a flat edge already, you won't have to use that flat spatula. You can literally just scrape it. Then you'll add that to your dry ingredients also. The last thing we're going to add to our dry ingredients is going to be our salt. We're gonna need 1/2 teaspoon. See how it's nice and level? That's what we want. We'll just sprinkle that on there. And now we're done with our dry ingredients. The next thing we can do is crack our egg right into our glass portion cup and make sure there's no shells in there. If there aren't, you're good to throw the eggshell away and give your hands a little wash. In class, our recipe calls for 1/2 cup of butter, 1/2 cup of white sugar, and 1/2 cup of brown sugar. And in our kitchen math unit, we learned that 1 stick of butter is equal to 1/2 cup. So we can put that right in the bowl of our stand mixer. Before we hook the paddle attachment up, you're going to have to line up these 2 holes on this bowl with the 2 notches on this KitchenAid. So we'll do one side, we'll do another side, and then you'll realize the bowl's tipping forward a little. You'll use both hands to stabilize it and then make sure that it's straight across. Then we're going to hook up our paddle attachment. So we have this notch, we have the notch on here. You'll push up and twist. Once you're all good there and you have your bowl attached and your paddle attached, you're going to take this arm right here and pull it up. What that's gonna do is raise the bowl so that the paddle attachment can actually mix what you're trying to mix. The next part of the recipe says to cream the butter and both sugars together until light and fluffy. So we're gonna add our 1/2 cup of white sugar. And we'll also add our 1/2 cup of packed brown sugar. You have to make sure that it's really packed down and it should come out in one big clump.
Wow, would you look at that?
Now that we have the butter and both sugars in there, we're going to start this on a stir so nothing flies out of the bowl. And then we are going to slowly raise up the speed so that it can get light and fluffy. It should take about 2 to 3 minutes. Once it's thoroughly mixed, you are going to add your egg and then continue to beat it on medium speed. Again, we're gonna start out slow and then we'll add some speed. And you are going to mix it just until it's all combined and a little bit more fluffy. You might need to scrape the bowl. Some stuff sticking to the side. So what I'm gonna do is actually lower the mixer, take the paddle off and the bowl off and scrape the sides. Now my sides are scraped, so I'm gonna continue until the egg is all incorporated. Once it looks like this, you're going to add 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, and then you're gonna mix it once again. At this point in the recipe, we're going to add our flour in slowly in about 3 different sections. So see how I still have some left in there? We are going to turn that on, make sure that gets all mixed in. Now we have the second round of flour that we're gonna mix. You wanna really make sure that you don't turn the mixer on too high or you'll get a whole cloud of flour in your face. Okay, that's all mixed in. Now we are going to add the last of our dry ingredients. So this is what it should look like when it's all well mixed together. You shouldn't see any separation of dry ingredients and the dough. And you also should make sure that if there's some dry ingredients left in the bottom of the bowl, that you take the time to scrape it off so that it all gets well incorporated. The last thing we're going to do is add our chocolate chips. This recipe calls for 1 cup, so you'll use 2 scoops of the 1/2 cup. To mix the chocolate chips, you're just simply going to want to put it on the stir just until they're mixed in. Okay, so this is what you want your dough to look like. And now you're going to take a rubber scraper. And the very last thing you're going to do is transfer the dough that you scraped from the bowl right into the Ziploc bag and flatten it out. When you're done, it should look something like this. And it's going to be about 1 inch thick. Why? Tomorrow, we're going to cut it into cookie shapes. You're going to refrigerate it overnight, and then we will bake our cookies next class. For tools and equipment on day 2, you will need a cutting board and a damp towel, a chef's knife. You'll need oven mitts. You'll also need a cookie sheet, as well as something that will make the cookies not stick on the cookie sheet. You can use cooking spray, parchment paper, and then we have these here. You'll also need a cooling rack. The only other thing you'll need today is your labeled bag of refrigerated dough. So for day 2, all we're going to need to do is make sure we preheat our oven to 375. Do that right when you get to class. Then what we're gonna do is actually use our chef's knife and cut these into about 1 inch by 1 inch squares. You wanna try and make it as uniform as possible. Like we talked about, consistency is key. I'll save that one for later. I'm just gonna square these off and we will combine that later. But you want them to be just about this big. So by the time you get done cutting your cookies into squares, 1 inch by 1 inch, your oven should be preheated and you can go ahead and put those in the oven. You want to make sure when you put things in the oven that you center it on the oven rack. And then what you're going to do is set a timer for 7 minutes. Okay, so here's what my cookies looked like when they came out of the oven. They've been cooling for a little bit. You're gonna just wanna put those right on the top of your range and then let them cool.